Well, we have the wonderful luxury of living in New York City. So my favorite bookstore in the entire universe, called Books of Wonder, which, by the way, if you ever come to New York City, you need to visit this store. They had the official Mockingjay release party with Suzanne Collins. So we were there.
It's pretty impossible to top that.
Yeah. We were there with her in the store. She read us a chapter from the book, and I may or may not have, cried, fainted, needed to lean on Adam for the majority of that, because it was just about the coolest thing I've ever done. And I had bought this really expensive, custom-made blue dress and found these matching shoes and had my Mockingjay pin. I had my friend do my hair up in braids, and it was probably one of the most magical experiences ever.
Yeah, I feel like I was the one person here. I remember I was at my old job at a blog called ology.com, and I was sitting, I remember the same thing on Twitter, the hashtag starting, and thinking, oh yeah, it's this Hunger Games series I've heard about, but what is that? Is it about food? Really, I was clueless. And I think at least one of my coworkers, our boss at the time, he was a huge fan of them. He actually did, I think, one of the first big casting galleries when the news of the movie just started to happen. Interestingly, he wanted Emma Roberts to play Katniss. So he was telling me, no, it's this great series, and, Mockingjay, and it's a symbol of this rebellion. And I was like, okay, I like dystopia, but I don't know if I really if I'm going to spend the time to read a young adult book. And it wasn't until I moved over to my current job at Crushable around, I guess it was right when I started, around March or so, that Lalit, who was on last week, Lalit Marcus, got me in touch with the Fireside Chat. And I was also sort of reading the books, and then suddenly I was like, I got to read all these books in time for my second episode of the chat because, A, I'm going to get spoiled, and B, I'd like to be able to talk about it. So I sort of read those books in a hurry. I mean, I enjoyed them, but I was also I was finishing college. I had this huge 2-hour oral exam that required me to read 16 books. And actually, I've been keeping track of the books I've read this year in 2011 for myself. And if you look at it, it's kind of like academic book, The Hunger Games, academic book, Catching Fire, academic book, Mockingjay. So, yeah, I think I read them in a matter of about a month or so, which itself was a few months after Mockingjay came out. So I feel like I never really got to be part of the hubbub of, all the interviews with Suzanne Collins once the book was out and all that, fresh excitement. So I'm always tempted to go back and retrace those articles, and now that I know the whole series, to kind of vicariously sharing with everyone, like you guys were saying, where you were, a flutter on Twitter for 24 hours, and it was all everyone was talking about.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember how well the sales did. They were remarkable. I mean, people who had never heard of Hunger Games, a lot of people, I think, did hear about it because of how successful the sale of the Mockingjay book was. And I remember I used to go to all the airports.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the airports, I would always go and see, where do they have it placed in, the airport bookstore. And I was, I was always excited when I'd see it so prominently on display. And Kate Farrell from Hunger Games Trilogy up in New Hampshire. Kate, what was your story like? New Hampshire's not necessarily the center of the world, but it's got a pretty avid Hunger Games fan base, partly thanks to you, from what I understand, that you were really spreading the word. Is that what you were doing a year ago?
Well, actually, a year ago, I had just joined Hunger Games Trilogy.net. The other admin, Celine, had just invited me on. So I actually did a live podcast from Nashua, New Hampshire, and it was at the Borders there, and so my friends and I went and did that at one of their little parties that they had, and they had some trivia, which was nice. But the day that Mockingjay actually came out, I had a sports practice, and then right after that, my mom and I drove down and got it, and I spent about 10 minutes just staring at it because, I didn't want it to end, so I didn't want to actually start reading. But then I brought it home, and I sat on the couch, and I just read for hours, and until my parents said I should probably go to bed, and then the next morning I got up and finished the rest of it. So what was kind of hard is that my mom was also going to read it because I convinced her to read the first two. So I couldn't give away anything. So I'm sitting there after I finished the book, and I'm, like, emotionally numb, after everything that happened. I was just not expecting it, just like the rest of you. And so my mom's like, oh, how was it? And I was like, oh, it was good, But I was just so afraid to give anything away. But I think for about 2 days I just walked around in a daze until I finally accepted what had happened.